Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker. Hello. All right. While we're having lunch, let me go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Mr. Andrew Pellis from Trihydro. Andrew is a board certified regulatory toxicologist in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He specializes in developing and implementing risk-based strategies for contaminated site assessment and closure. Andrew also keeps tabs on environmental regulations impacting industry, including rulemaking activities for contaminants of emerging concerns such as PFAS. Outside work, he enjoys sailing, reading obscure scientific books, and fixing vintage machineries. His presentation dives into the specific background behind the risk-based regulations and reports on the current status of risk-based water regulations in U.S. impacting water providers, wastewater plants, operators, and other regulated entities. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Kima. Appreciate the introduction. So, since I was picked on this morning, I'm going to return the favor. Don. So actually, I'm going to adopt your style of speech, and then I'll hardly cover any of the slides, and I'll just provide a narrative, because there's a lot of information provided today, multiple speakers, and I really need you just to remember a few things from my presentation. So one of the things, go ahead, next slide, is the context. We all talk about regulations in the space of PFAS, but there's certain commonalities that apply to all of these. And that is the risk, the public health risk basis to those environmental regulations. So I think that as part of appreciating and understanding these rules, I think we have to go back to basics and kind of wrap our head around, why are we doing this? Just take a pause and say, why are we doing this? And maybe having that understanding will help you to kind of see what the agencies are trying to accomplish. And the word is trying because it doesn't always come out right. Sometimes some of the actions are a little bit sooner than the scientists would like them to be seen. Next slide. Okay, so if you have a chance to read the rule, and this is the MCL rule. As a risk assessment practitioner in toxicology, you have to be aware of certain keywords because in common risk communication, those keywords may be modified. But again, pointing to Dawn, I think there's very important aspect of making sure that the words are the right words. Dawn, in your legal realm, it's very important what may or does or shall. I mean, there's specificity to it. So I think a reader should understand that there is specificity to the meaning. So you can see all these excerpts were taken out of the rule. So the number one is may have an adverse effect on the health of persons. So may, it does not lead to, it's not proven to, it's may. So remember that there's uncertainty. May implies, and okay, that's fine. Okay, some background noise. Okay, and then the second one is known to occur. Okay, so that's a little more certain statement. And then there's another, I guess, conditional word, substantial likelihood. And then finally, there's the frequency and levels of public concern. And the last one, maybe that speaks a little bit to the EPA's discretion. And that's quite interesting. It's the sole judgment of the administrator of EPA. The regulation of such contaminants presents a meaningful opportunity to help risk reduction for persons served by public water systems. So just let that sink for a second. And that's one of the slides I want you to remember. Just be careful what you read. Next slide. Okay. Additional language, and now we are diving a little deeper because there's certain scientific statements that EPA makes as the justification basis of the rule. Again, very specific language, yet it's not so clearly cut in black and white. Next slide. Okay, real quickly. And Kima, if you keep me on track, I appreciate it. All right, so here's one of the very, very overarching concepts. And to have an actual concern associated with risk to public health, they have to be a combination of demonstrated exposure. In our case, maybe it's just found PFAS in drinking water, but also the known presence of adverse effect associated to a specific chemical that was detected. And then there's sufficient scientific evidence that that level of exposure is also linked to public health concerns. If you don't have that overlap in the middle, usually there's no cause for action. And maybe I'll show you some of the data and also current evidence we have right now, this year, 2024, that overlap is not so clear cut. When you talk to a lot of the practitioners in PFAS and scientists and risk assessors, toxicologists at large. Next slide. The point of this slide is maybe not for you to load the circle labels, anything like that. This point to an existing practice by EPA, documented approach to dealing with chemical exposures in the environment as they impact human health and ecological receptors. This is nothing new. One point I want to make about this, and this is also commonly observed by other experts, is that EPA may not be looking very strictly at the existing guidance and rules when they proceed with regulations on PFAS impacting public health. That's a common comment. And in the response to comments, that's also, we can see that multiple scientists, agencies, experts make that observation. Next slide. Okay, this is the third overarching, extremely important concept. Just because you get exposed to PFAS in drinking water, if your public water system sends you a report now or in the future, hey, we're seeing some PFAS and PFAS, and here's a disclosure, there is not necessarily a reason for immediate concern to you, your family, or the community. And this is why. It's almost like a Swiss cheese. Between the actual exposure, which is on the left-hand side of that long procession of events that must take place, and a harm or public health disease, there have to be multiple steps, alignment, so to speak, in those slices of Swiss cheese. So what it means that there's a lot of redundancy built into our biology to protect ourselves from chemical exposure. We fix our DNA 1,000 times a second. It gets broken down, but we fix ourselves all the time. We can't get rid of chemicals. There are multiple means, including breaking them down inside our cells, and we have a whole systems designed to protect ourselves from those chemicals. So again, remember that slide. Just because you see soundbite, hey, we see it in air, water, Now I have to be really concerned, not necessarily. So that word may, extremely important to understand. There's a long procession between I see it in the results, and then the may have population harm. It's a long road to reach there. Next slide. So I'm going to go a little quicker now. So remember those, you've seen this table multiple times, so I'm not going to spend too much time, and I believe Amy, everyone will receive the copies of the slides, so you can look at it closer. But what I want to point out, and I'm setting this up for the speaker later on, who's going to talk about the statistics of things. And maybe Danny, maybe you make a comment on it, but this is from the MCO rule. The PQL, the practical quantitation limit, are in the same range, essentially, chemically as the MCLs. And there's some real challenges with that. And Bill Warren Hicks will speak about that extremely difficult situation here. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. There's a better example of this visually. Okay. So then looking at those two circles, exposure and the actual effects. Now let's look at the exposure. And this is, again, this is data from the MCO rule. These are the results from the UCMR 3 and 13, 15. And here are the actual results. So you can see that there is some exceedances of each of the 6, except the HFPO, which was not analyzed for, in multiple public water systems. So we do see it. We do see it. Now, this was data from federal monitoring. Similar data collected by state show a greater detection frequency simply because the PQLs were lower, so they were able to just see more. And I see Danny nodding, so thank you. Next slide. All right, and here again, there's some statistics, and I'm going to through them very quickly. You have these tables, so we do see PFHS, NA, VS, NHPO, and this is combined the federal and state testing. And here on this water drop, you can see that 200 water systems had exceedances of MCL, the new MCL, and then NA was 50 was observed, and 10 for HFPO. Okay, and then the latest round, the UCMR 5, which is still ongoing, and data are being collected, it shows general similar trends. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, this is a summary of the PFOS before state testing results and exceedances of the MCL. PFOS was detected between 0.2 and 650 nanograms per liter, so quite a nice, large range. And the PFOS detection range from 1 to 12 nanograms per liter. And based on the results, quite a sizable, I mean, we have over 1,000 water systems exceeding the PFOS and PFOA MCLs. So that's a very high number. Next slide. All right, this is a slide I'm going to stop for a second because Dr. K did mention that from each of these MCL endpoints, and that's the toxicological endpoints, there's different kinds of effect. And then if you recall, the way we handle some of the 4 of the PFAS MCL compounds through the hazard index approach. Skip the equation, we don't need to look at that. Just remember this graphic. So going back to the standard US EPA guidance for performing risk assessment when you have multiple contaminants, the basic tenet is for you to be able to add the toxicity from each, and this is what the hazard index is doing. You have to meet the criterion that they are indeed additive. Okay? So they have to act in the same way. But if you look at the information about what is the endpoint that each MCL is protecting, and you can see one is for liver enzyme effects, other one is thyroid hormone, body growth, and thyroid enlargement. You can see that other than the thyroid effects, they're different. They're different. So in effect, what the HI is doing is creating a bit of a fruit salad, right? We're not adding apples to apples anymore, or oranges, as it is per US EPA guidance says that. Well, EPA and MCL decided that it's close enough. It's not vegetables, but we're going to make fruit salad, and we're just going to move on. And that's the basis of the pushback against experienced experts. It's like, you know, in your guidance, you're making us follow the guidance on the circular side, Superfund, but then MCL is not following it. So there's a little bit of disconnect. So just remember the fruit salad here. Next slide. 5 minutes left. And here it is. So if the hazard index and MCL rules was effective today, which is not, we have a little bit of time left, 3 years or so more. If you were to look at all the state water testing results, here's the summary. So they had 864 samples from 211 public water systems exceeding that cumulative HI of 1. So that's the statistics. Next slide. Okay. So that was the whole exposure and looking at the water level data in context of MCLs and the application of hazard index, which is really perfect, but it is what it is. So now looking at what do we know today, this year, 2024, about the actual effects or associations between PFAS exposure and adverse effects on human beings. So here's the list. And I know that depending on the communication you read, there's a long list of number of things. And then I think the reader should, I don't think they can understand which is the most important. So I'm kind of summarizing this for you. So the 3 adverse effects that EPA latched on and monetized through the regulatory impact analyses, they have to do that. One is the cardiovascular effect, specifically bad cholesterol levels and cholesterol levels in general in blood. And that has been associated for 4 of the 6 MCO PFAS, PFAS, Hexa-S, and Na. But the second one was the developmental effects. And this is SGA, or small for gestation size. And for the 4 of the PFAS compounds. And then cancer. There's a lot of discussion about cancer. I think the information is a little clearer for PFOA, specifically kidney and testicular cancer. PFAS, the evidence is not as strong, yet EPA designated them as likely human carcinogens, nevertheless. And then interestingly enough, if you read the rule closer, they also mention the disinfection byproducts that are found in drinking water. And they also have cancer. They cause cancer, kidney cancer. And that's well known. So they're kind of mixing all these things together as if the PFAS case wasn't strong enough. So they have to add another contaminant that's there. So it's kind of interesting that they do that. All right, and there's some subclinical events potentially linked to disease. And then EPA acknowledges that they cannot put them in the economic analysis piece at all. Okay, moving on real quickly now. That's another good slide. This is actually amalgamation from over 300 scientists worldwide. This is not one agency, federal or state in the US. This is international body of evidence. And this is relatively recent. This was published. The message here is there's a huge range in regulatory numbers amongst the agencies who have the power to regulate drinking water. So you can see this is not clear. That science is not clear. This agency with experts decide to regulate PFAS differently. Next slide. Okay. All right, this is a quick summary. Again, look at the range in the top left corner of the actual point of departure for various endpoints. So this is pretty dense. I'm going to skip and go on to quickly conclusions. Next slide. All right, real snapshot. This shows the liver distribution of what the different mineral rules are doing in terms of presumptive harm and demonstrated harm. And I think one outlier is OSHA. Dr. Eden and I commented that OSHA is actually not very active in this space. Next slide. Okay, so here's the takeaways. Yes, we do see PFAS before all the other compounds that we test for. Look for the UCMR5 results because that will inform the public of what the actual exposures are anymore. And then keep in mind that many of these rules have a review. So in MCLs, I think it's a 6-year review cycle that they're going to look at it again and possibly add more PFAS to the rules. And then in this, right now, there's really no compelling evidence that the general public is adversely affected by PFAS before all the other MCL exposures to cause public health concerns. So with this, I'm going to stop here and then have FEMA come up and introduce the next speaker. So thank you.